Hello, this is Graham again from Gramophones. I thought in this video I would look at calibrating the speed on an HMV model, mainly the portables. The method with the HMV tend to differ from the Garrard in that many of the motors, unlike the Garrard, which had the governor pad that was adjustable by moving a spindle to move it in and out of the governor disc. The HMV models, the majority of them, from probably suppose all of them from the more 1930s upwards, used a spring system for initially setting the position of the governor pad. I've got one here to explain it a little bit further. This is a number 59 out of a 101, and you can see that what we have here is an armature that comes up from the governor pad. The governor obviously I've taken out, but that pad there would be acting upon the spinning governor disc, and this one is spring loaded. You can see it. There's a spring in there. I don't know whether we can probably get that. You can just see inside there is a spring around a central large screw that is connected both to the chassis and to that armature so that it springs backwards and forwards. So this is already in a set location before we even start, except that when we're servicing the motor we do need to make sure that arm is free and will spring back. That will be vital later in the process that I'm going to be showing you with regard to calibrating the speed and adjusting the position of the controller on the speed indicator. Sometimes this is seized, so it's locked in any one position, which is no good whatsoever, as you will understand later on. So this system seems to be used. It was used obviously in this one, the 59, and the 69, which is essentially the same motor, except instead of the angled wind it has a horizontal wind for use in table models. But it was also used in their 200 and 400 series of motors. Okay, so that's the motor. Just let's take a quick look at ways HMV used of controlling the position of that little spring-loaded armature. So what we're going to look at here are three ways that, or three designs that HMV came up with for the control arm, very much dependent upon the position of the motor and the particular type of the motor. This one here is off an HMV 100 from 1924. Here's another design of control unit. This came off an HMV 103. You notice the HMV 100 was the armature was in an aperture. This one is kind of outside of the actual arm itself. This is the third design. This was off an HMV 102C, and actually was a very common control system used by HMV right throughout the 30s. So what we're looking at here is the speed control system on an HMV 101. This is one of the later models, which is why you can see the auto brake up here. This is from about 1930-31. However, what you will notice is that the speed control is exactly the same as we saw on the third photograph, where we were looking at the controller on a 102C from later. Both of these, this one and the 102C, differed in style and design from the two earlier photographs. But despite those differences, the principles upon which all of those worked was exactly the same. If we look at this a little bit closer, we'll see that coming through the motorboard here is the end of the armature that carries the governor pad. And as we know from what we saw earlier, that's spring loaded. If I let that go, it wants to flick back. In this case, it can only flick back as far as that plate will allow it. and that plate is connected through to the pointer. And what we're trying to achieve is a speed of 78 RPM, 79 RPM at the spindle when this arm is pointing to 78 on the speed indicator. So in order to do that, what we first of all need to do is to assess the speed we've got at the spindle. And to do that, we could use either the strobe disc, which I showed in an earlier video, or I can use a digital tachometer, which is what I'm going to use in this instance. So I'll just load that spindle with the disc that's got the reflective tab on it. Try and get that a little bit flatter. There we go, that will do. And get the speed up to the maximum that it will go in that position. Okay, now what we're going to do is just take a reading of that, and the reading is coming out at 78.8 RPM. That's fine. In fact, I would have been very surprised if that had been anything different, because I've already calibrated the speed on this machine. But let's imagine that that speed was a lot higher. In other words, that while this was pointing at 78 here, this was revolving at around about 85. It was much higher than it needs to be. In that case, what we need to do is move the arm towards the slow. Now what's going to happen is, if you look at that, if you look at the movement in that little armature, as I move slow, it's moving forwards. So I know that if this is revolving at 85, that armature needs to be stopped at a position in that direction. So obviously, if I move that back to, say, there, take a reading from the spindle and get 78, then I know that what I've got to do is make sure that armature is being stopped by that plate at a point beyond where it is at the moment. Now if I bring that back to 78, it's obviously going to be pushing it back. So what I have to do is release that screw and move that plate slightly forwards, so that this armature now is being allowed to just move up a little bit from its previous position. Clamp those off, take a reading. If that reading is 78, 79, then I'm fine. If, however, it's slower, then what I've got to do is the opposite of what I've just done. Bring this towards the fast, take a reading till I have 78, 79. I know then that I'm going to have to bring this plate back a little bit. So looking at how much movement I needed to get to the 78 from where it was on its previous speed, I can judge just approximately how much I've got to move this plate backwards. So as you can see, it's a system of trial and error, but eventually you will arrive at the speed there being approximately to what it is there. As I've said before, 78, 79 RPM I'm fine with at that point. When I've got the record on and it's on the turntable and the sound box on, there may be a little bit of drag, although I don't find there's too much more than a revolution or so, and that can easily be taken up by a slight movement there if you're that particular about the speed. So there we are, a little bit of a messy process. It's a little bit of trial and error there, although as I've mentioned before in previous videos, if anyone's any better way of doing that than that, please do let me know. None of this stuff seems to be written down anywhere, although you can glean pieces of information from various sources. But that's the way I do it. It's a little bit messy, but I do get there eventually. And if you know of any better way, do let me know. The contact form is on my website at gramophones.co.uk, so please do get in touch. In the meantime, I hope that was useful. I hope you enjoyed it. and I hope you come back and see me some more sometime. Thank you.